Hello, everyone. Now, before I get started, the important thing. How you're all doing? Let's see. Hello, Dan Freeman. I see you got here first today. I may be a bit lax in my regulating duties today. My length of rope with a hardened tar end needs repair, and I've also got a webinar to tune into. Good afternoon, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hello, Stafford Thompson. Happy Trafalgar Day for yesterday to all of you as well. I didn't get to do my usual of wandering around university, confusing all my students by going, hello and happy Trafalgar Day. I also do happy Toronto Day and happy Altmark Day, which tends to get a whole load of people looking at me very confused and then probably hunting down rather a lot on Wikipedia. Hello, Kilo 19. Hello, Dunrick Ironhammer. Hello, Jess P. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Bitchin. Hello, Aviate Enterprise. Hello, Dunrick. Well, I think I've said hello, Dunrick Iron. You were saying hello to Dan, then you said hello to me. That's good. Jim Heaton, hello. Hello. Let's see. Hello, DGV40. Hello, Calvin Gaswood. Hello, Vast Admiral Nelson. Glad you could join us. I should probably go hello, sir. Or actually, no, it's... hello, Derpscott. Hello, Buccaneer. Hello, Eric Arkan. Hello, Gordon Collins. And hello, Testudines. I bought a can of Irn Bru for this occasion. Excellent. Eric Arkan, sorry you've been absent lately. Working on my history assignment. I will always be happy if people are absent for history. Although I have to point out at the moment, I did see a rather interesting article today about access to the National Archives, and my main thought was, I haven't managed to get into the National Archives at all recently. Yeah, so I have to say that that's an interesting debate to get into because whilst I agree the archivists need to be protected, I don't think the current problems of getting access there are necessarily to do with protecting the archivists or the archivists. In my experience, the archivists themselves are usually very, very keen on getting as many people in there as they can to sort of, and being as helpful as possible. Usually when I have issues with the National Archives, it's with their management, who are very, very interesting. So, I hope the volume's all okay. I have been playing around with this and doing multiple things today. So, as a rule, whenever I have a day which involves MS Teams, Skype, and XSplit broadcasting on YouTube, the microphone goes completely and utterly haywire at least 2 or 3 times a day. Greetings, William Cox. Hello, Jim Heaton, and hello, Brock. So, as you've probably guessed, for those who've watched the introduction already put out, this is going to be slightly different in that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Battle of Trafalgar in terms of itself, because honestly, there are lots of people who are happy to spend a long time talking about the Battle of Trafalgar. The interesting impact on the Battle of Trafalgar isn't as much the battle as its legacy. In fact, at one point I'll probably be arguing here that actually the Battle of Trafalgar is Nelson's least innovative action. It's a slogging match, and it can never afford not to be, because it's in the middle of the ocean, both ships are sailing, there is no providing of geography or circumstance which enables him to do anything more innovative than really charge the fleet. Breaking his fleet up into multiple columns is a way of making sure he brings more of his firepower to bear more quickly. If you have them sailing in one line, that's going to take longer for the whole fleet to get there. Sailing in 2 gives you options. But we will, of course, be talking about the battle first. But the legacy of Trafalgar and Nelson's legacy in terms of how it shapes a worldview and how it shapes modern navies today is quite large, if not massive. And we'll be getting into all of that. So it's going to be a slightly different, but also slightly regular day. Good evening, Jalenworth and Angus of Sunnel. You've arrived since I started my little welcome spiel. And as always, thank you to everyone who likes the videos. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and who presses the little bell down there. And thank you to everyone who's a patron. You really, as I was saying in Brew Ships the other day, you really are critical to my keeping up my research at the moment, especially as I can't get access to National Archives, no matter how many times I click on that one on Monday morning, it seems. And so I'm dependent upon books. Books are useful. Although, the other thing is, the more subscribers I get, it seems to me the more publishing companies are happy to send me copies of their brand new books, not the old books, which, as you know, I do like to work through, but the brand new books for me to do book reviews of. So subscribers are welcome from that perspective as well. The more subscribers I have, the more books I can get sent to me to review. Not because I want to mine them shamelessly for information, because I can't get in the archives to get it myself. To review. Bitchin'. I watch a lot of YouTube videos on the after effects of the Battle of Endor with the fall of Empire, as opposed to destruction of the Death Star itself. Those are some quite interesting videos. Hello, Yickers! And hello, Bijon, if I haven't said that already. So, Trafalgar. It's how we all know it. But I would like to point you all out to my favourite ship. My favourite ship is HMS Africa. I love her. And I love what she does in the battle. She basically, look at her up the top there, just basically going, I'm going to sail up against the whole of the French and Spanish fleet, the combined Allied fleet. I do not care. I'm going to sail right to them. Lord Nelson says engage more closely. I will engage as closely as I can. I am a random 64 guns ship of the line. She's just fun. She's just great. It's the whole Royal Navy summed up. It's why when people say Nelson's this exceptional thing or this thing, I'm sitting there going, Captain Digby. He's actually he's called Digby. Okay, of HMS Africa sums up the Royal Navy. It's a case of there are enemy there, the admiral's going there. The rules of the war means theoretically I should try and form up on one of these lines, but the enemy's there, so I'm going to go there. And for a while, there are actual discussions going on between certain of the admirals in some of the records of the combined fleets, where they think there's another line behind Africa. They think that Nelson has got 3 lines out there, and Africa is the head of another one coming down. Oh, it's fun times. Now, so Africa, HMS Africa is my favorite in Battle of Trafalgar. I also love the way that this sort of picture, which is fairly close to time, shows that the fleet is really, they're forming up on lines, but they're not quite perfect. They're as good as the Royal Navy is. Circumstance, wind, etc. doesn't mean they'll be perfect. The combined fleet is certainly not perfect. It doesn't get into a proper line formation. And I don't think Villeneuve was trying to get into line formation, because he doesn't seem to think a line formation is how you beat Nelson. Remember, he fought Nelson at the Nile. He fought Nelson. He'd been studying Nelson. He knew how the British were going to break. His idea was to try and have a reaction force. I've seen mentioned some places. I'm not really sure he ever gets that, or either has an admiral he could trust in charge of the reaction force. Let's get through some of these questions that come up. Let's see. Danragano, careful, you'll turn into a regular booktuber at Dr. Clark. No, no, no. But it's going to be still always going to be, and even longer term. And I'm keeping this up 2 lives a week while I'm working from home full time, as I can do that. But even when I go back to doing regular lecturing in university, I'll keep up at least. Well, my plan then will be one long patrol video on a Tuesday, a introduction and a live on a Thursday on a topic, and then the book reviews again on Sundays. I'm going Sunday's the book review show, Brew Ships. So it's never going to be never going to be a booktuber channel because it's sort of that. But there is always going to be a hefty amount of books in there because I'm a historian. Books are what we deal with. Whether they're very old books, like some of these, or very, very new books, like these. They are lovely books, and they're part of it. And it's an important part to discuss the books out there because I do know so many of you love watching the videos, but also know some of you like to go and read the books. And I think if I'm getting sent the books to review and I can share them with you, my idea, rather like doing this sort of thing, is that you get an idea of what you're buying before you buy it. Because some of these books cost so much money. And that is something, and again, perhaps there are book reviews which are written ones, and there'll be a video one provided by me here. And I'm sure other people do that as well, but it's just something I'm adding in. Dan Freeman, we like free books, and if I can't get them... Dan Freeman, do you like HMS Africa because it means you can then start singing the song by Toto? That would be so tempting to do, but I want not to go to ruin the song by Toto. But, I just... HMS Africa is just cool how she does it. Africa is an old 64, and she just doesn't care. She's charging in. And it's interesting, Africa has a history of coming quite close to a couple of battles and not getting there in time. So there's part of me which treats this whole scenario as the ship going, and the ship. And when I talk about this, I'm talking about the ship, the crew, and the ship, understand the history of their ship and all these things. And they're just going, "There's a battle. It's not going to be over before we get to it. We are going to go straight to it. We're not running a chance of missing out on this one, or the French are getting away again. We are going to this battle." And that's what Africa does. And you see, I love victory. I've wandered around her, but I often tell people, actually, my favourite ship in Portsmouth to go around is HMS Warrior, because what Warrior represents to me is the Royal Navy in a time of transition and trying to manage it. Victory represents the Royal Navy at the height of a period. And she's beautiful, and she's history there. She's Trafalgar, she's Nelson, she's all these things. She's amazing. But she's many other battles as well from that period. She's St. Vincent, or Jarvis, as he was known at the time, flagship at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. All these things, she is a representative of. But if I had my choice of which age of sail ship I would love to still be around in the world, it would be HMS Africa. Because I think having a 64 like her storied history around would demonstrate so much about what the age of sail ships were about. Hello, Jack Hunter. Angus O'Connell, some of the best first-person shooter games have a story plot no more complex than here is a gun, there are some enemies. Yes. And really, when you're talking in an open battle, a fleet battle in the Age of Sail, it's really not much more complicated than that. General, there is a public house named for Captain Digby at Kingsgate Point between Margate and Ramsgate in Kent. Yes, there is. And it's much deserved. And I went in there once and they did a lovely Yorkshire pudding. They had a beautiful roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. It was a Sunday, I think. They were serving food. I think that was where I had it. I seem to remember picking it because of its name. My family and my girlfriend have a bit of a suspicion about me because I don't drink alcohol, as you all know, but I am quite good at picking out good pubs where they will serve good food. And sometimes I'll take them into places and go, looking at them, I'll go, that one looks good, and wander in. And they are always confused as they have gone back and wondering, everyone's going, how did he, when he never visited, work out which was the good one? Well, the secret is quite simple. You look for the one that's got the funniest architecture, but it's still in good nick. Because if they can maintain, are diligent enough to maintain the architecture, the odds are they're diligent enough to work quite hard on the food. And then you ask for a Coke, and if it's flat, you go out and leave the room. Because if they can't maintain their soft drinks, they definitely can't maintain anything else. That's good. The light and reflection of the light and the limitations of webcams makes War at Sea book like it might be a book on something a little more carnal. This one, I'm worried about you in that respect, man. Or this one. I don't know. Oh, well. Calm Gunsmith. HMS Africa. Han Solo chasing stormtroops on the first Death Star. French fleet. The troopers running because they think their adversary knows what he's doing. Yes, pretty much. Sometimes I'm happy that we won't be losing you once you start working. Or our PM has ruined. Jangrin, it's more. I think it's more that the French van couldn't get back in time due to wind. To an extent, they couldn't get back in time, but also they couldn't get back. There was Africa coming up, causing them trouble. As Nelson himself had shown with HMS Captain at St. Vincent, one ship well placed can cause a lot of trouble in a sea battle. Calm Gasman. And maybe HMS Africa was blessed by the appearance of the There was no Blackburns in this one. Daniel Renoble, how long did it take for the second line of ships to meet the enemy? All right, I have a time stamp, and I will get it out here. It takes about, let's see. Nelson, it's quite interesting is that the first column which actually makes contact with the enemy is Collingwood's, and then Nelson's Collingwood gets into firing position about 40 minutes later, roughly. Roughly, it's a interesting sort of debate because you have to remember that timings are, it's when people are looking at the battle, their watches, and they're noting it down. Are they noting it down in the log immediately? Are they taking, are they dealing with other things? It's the person who's noting down the log, same person who started at the battle, noting it down in the log, keeping to the same watch and the same timing. So timings are an interesting thing in those battles, but this is about 40 minutes, roughly. From the first line getting there to the second line round. Now, let's see. Oh. Jalen, I've been there several times. Excellent cuisine. Glad that someone else is also has the same memories of it as me. Durscott, no, the bigger one. Second from next to your copies of Jane's. Oh, good lord. Chronology of the War at Sea, that one? Yeah, that's the Ra book. It's written by a German. Jürgen Ra. Right. William Cox, what's an average speed of man to war at this time? 3 to 5 knots? They can go a little bit faster than that. They can... Well... I think it's roughly... them top speeds probably in the 7 to 8 knots at advantage at the moment. Once they're in full battle trim. If they're fully accounting for the sails and everything's worked out, then they can go probably a little faster. But that's when they've got everything tucked in. Once they've got everything maneuvered in their battle formation, battle form, and all the weights distributed as such, it does affect the sailing handling of the ship. Sam Thompson, Collingwood. So the blood dynasty that the prof mentioned in Bilge Pumps 15 goes back a ways. Yeah, a little bit. Jack Hunter, what do you think Nelson could have had on the RN and Collingwood's career had he survived Trafalgar? I have a feeling Collingwood would have still ended up commanding the Mediterranean fleet. They're both vice admirals at this time. I wouldn't be surprised if Nelson isn't called back to command the Channel fleet, just in case. And they'd have probably continued up the Navy together. I would think one of the interesting things is you might well have had them doing an interplay of operations so that you don't have Collingwood permanently on deployment, because really Collingwood is the only one trusted at distance for a while. So you could have had both going backwards and forwards, but yeah, they'd had an interesting career. We'll get into that. So what's going on at this time? Why does the Battle of Trafalgar take place? Well, there are lots of battles going on. This is just the wars of the coalition. These are not even all the Napoleonic wars going on, and all the Renaissance front, all the issues in this sort of the second 100 Years' War. This is just a period of 14 years of war. Sorry, if I'm laughing suddenly, it's because the fluffy research assistant is having a conversation with my mum, just within hearing range, and they are, there's a sort of I can see you, and they're playing hide and seek, doing sound. Anyway, the War of the First Coalition was April 1792 to 1797. It's the longest one of the three wars, and please note this, okay? Terry Pratchett has this great line in one of his books, which is the kind of peace where they only agreed peace because they'd run out of rocks, and it's the kind of peace where both sides are rapidly trying to find more sharpened stakes. Peace is declared, but because of the way it's declared and the treaties, the way they're negotiated, neither side is ever happy. Okay? One loses its foreign lusters and its foreign adventures. The other sides have had humiliations handed down to them on their borders. This is one of the troubles for Napoleon, is he's trying to build an empire and he is almost too successful. He's beating up everyone, and so they're scared of him constantly. And fear, as Machiavelli says, it's better to be feared than it's better to be loved than feared, but it's better to be feared than ignored. Napoleon's not good at making himself loved. He's very good at making himself feared. But the trouble is, because of his limitations when it comes to naval strategy and his limitations when it comes to navies he has at his command, mean that the trouble is the big power across the way that wants to be an even bigger power and invests in quite a lot of wooden walls is always able to plot and pay for more war. And all these wars are really bankrolled by British gold and British trade. All of them are really, all the coalitions that fight against the French are bankrolled by the British. That's good. I think it's also to depend on how many people that Nelson managed to scandalize with indecent liaisons. Might have heard his speed of promotion depending on politics. Remember, that had already happened, okay? And he'd still been promoted. The thing is, you have to remember that with war continuing on, and wars were continuing on, the British government had a choice. This is why I say I doubt Nelson would ever make First Sea Lord. Sorry, he's not that good at admin, and because of his liaisons, and that's a political post. But giving him nice commands to go and command fleets, that's fine. That's perfectly understandable because he's a fighting admiral. You put him off to sea. The moment peace comes, you probably retire him. But hello, Surf Tectonics. Remember, Nelson did have one big advantage. He'd been a captain from the age of 21. So, that does kind of help with your promotions. It does somehow. I can't think why. Now, I'm just picking up dates because I know I did it in the introduction, but I want to remember it again. And frankly, I am always worried about getting the coalitions right because they change. We'll start off with the first coalition. Starts off with the Kingdom of France, who fight it till 1792, and then it's the French First Republic. And they are backed up by the Latvian Republic from 1795 and the Polish legions from 1797, and the sister republics and Spain from 1796. The British side of the coalition includes the Army of the Conde, the Dutch Republic until 1795, Great Britain, the Holy Roman Empire until 1797, the Habsburg Monarchy until 1797, Prussia until 1795, Naples until 1796, Portugal, Sardinia until 1796, and Spain, of course, transfers sides in 1795. And there are also various other Italian city-states involved, including a few friends. Yeah, the first coalition is not a great war for anyone's perspective. The second coalition, well, they're facing off against France, Spain, the Polish legions, Latvian Republic, Helvetic Republic, Cisalpine Republic, Roman Republic, which is there until 1799, and the Parthenopean Republic, which is also there until 1799, and Denmark and Norway join in as well for lots of fun. There is also the second coalition includes the second Holy Roman and the Holy Roman Empire until 1801, and Austria, of course, until 1801. Great Britain, Russia, Portugal, Naples, Grand Duchy of Tuscany, Order of St. John, Ottoman Empire, and the French Royalists. Plus 13 colonies, then USA. All sorts of fun things. And then the third coalition. Well, that had France, Latvian Republic, Bavaria, Etruria in Italy, Spain, Württemberg on one side, and the Holy Roman Empire, Naples, Russia, Sicily, Sweden, and Great Britain on the other side. It's all fun. There are lots of very good, very experienced admirals involved. Yeah, I do have it on 10 minutes. And they do a lot of successful stuff. They win a lot of battles. The French win some battles, but the British win a lot more at sea. But on land, you have problems. You have a lot of problems. Jailing, what is it with these Central European corporals who have no knowledge? I wouldn't ever call Napoleon a corporal of any kind. Inca, hello. I think I said that already, but I'm just checking. Yes, Albazaski, I've read the revolution wiped out most of the aristocracy from the Russian Navy. It never recovered from the losses. It did. A lot of the experienced naval officers were... Hello and happy. Frederico, when he retires, he'd probably find another navy to command. That would again be quite a possibility. That's good. Napoleon was good at making himself loved amongst the army, and after the army switched sides when he returned from exile in Elba. I'm not sure if it continued, but it was that. Yes, he was very good. But again, it's kind of like, as I said in the introduction about Nelson, he wins. And if you win and are successful, then your soldiers and sailors tend to love you, especially if you look after them. And that's the advantages he has. And they also tend to follow your orders because you've won before, so they're thinking, probably win this time. And the Surf Territorials, Napoleon Wars are most confusing. They are fun to look at. That's why I had to say Total War Empire was always my favourite of ones to play on strategic game, though I don't think the map was big enough. I think they could have had an even bigger map with more things involved. Inca, countries change sides out of threat, self-interest, or what? All three. Honestly, all three. Danraganama. Well, on bright side, we, Norway, got a constitution out. Let's ignore the whole to get back with the Denmark plot. Well, you know, these things work. Hello, constant drowsiness. British campaign in Flanders was a bit of a disaster, although I hear that chap Wellesley is doing well out in India. That was another example of all that was going on. Britain wasn't just fighting a war in Europe, it was fighting a war in India as well at that time. Sam Thompson, Troubles on Land, Eagle Prince of Orange. We're not going to go there. Okay, we're not going to go there. I could spend a lot of time talking through the various generals of these wars and going, and this one managed to not see this going on. Somehow. Austerlitz is a classic example. Austerlitz is one of those battles where you sit there and go, so, you have a river going around here, and you see the French in here, and you cross the bridges to go after them. Bridges get blown up. You are now trapped and unable to get away. And they have artillery. And you know from your intelligence that the French have a lot of artillery. Why? And then you go and say, oh, I didn't order that, or I didn't expect them to do this. You're the generals in charge. You're in charge. You are the adults in the room. There are lots of young piss and vinegar people who are going to charge in. The whole point of having the senior officer with all that fricking gold braid is you're there to rein it in and focus it. Not let it happen. Or encourage it. Brock Payne, reading Napoleon's victory. I think Bonaparte, in the battles he commanded, had something like an 80% win rate. A little bit hard on that, but yeah. Hence why much of the Allied plan later in wars to avoid Napoleon himself and fight his marshals. Not... Well, yeah, to an extent. Or to try and get him to command a fleet. That was another thing they would quite like to. If he'd gone to sea, the British would have been quite happy to say hello to him. Then I was someone called Massena, surname, and she was very happy that my immediate reference question was, any relation to the French Marshal? The answer was yes, by the way. Whatever, lines work for you, I suppose. Dirt Squad. Win without horrendous casualties. If I remember correctly, a man does not get himself killed for a halfpenny a day. You have to speak to the heart. That's something there. Sir Trek Tungus. Is there any scenarios Napoleon could have achieved victory or stalemate where France controlled Central Europe as a dynasty? Quite a few, honestly. He could have done it if he'd either... Well, I'd have said, actually, his invasion of Russia was the silly thing. If he hadn't used so many troops and resources to go after Russia and had left Russia alone, he would have had quite an experience, quite a large army to secure his areas. And if he'd spent as much time focused, he was always very active. The ideas as the Code Napoleon, all these things. If he'd managed to actually stay around, sustain his position long enough, and actually impose himself to form a proper nation, he could well have formed something which wouldn't have been too different in many forms to what the British end up with, which is a democracy and a monarchy combined. That's what I have a feeling it would have ended up with, something like something along the lines of. But he wanted it all. It was that Queen song all over again. I want it all. He did. He wanted it all, and he overreached himself. So it's defeated by his own ego again, which is a habit for dictators, let's be honest. Or to put it as Dirt Squad's just put it, Napoleon's main issue was that he thought he could beat everyone, which he might have been able to, but not all at the same time. Yeah, pretty much. So, here are the fleets at Trafalgar, and I always enjoyed talking about those ones. So, I have actually taken them from where I got my notes from, largely, which is the Royal Navy's Order of Battle. Africa is her own line. The weather column, having the weather gauge the whole way through. You'll notice that some of these ships are commanded by, for example, Ajax, a 74 two-decker, commanded by Lieutenant John Pilford, acting captain. But you've got some names there. Pellew, well, it's Israel Pellew, but Digby, of course, at the top. Harvey Fremantle, Boynton, Condrington, Mansfield, Laforey. I bet you're all wondering where the Laforey class destroyer came from. Well, guess what she was named for? Hargood. There's Mars, which starts off being commanded by Captain George Duff, but then Lieutenant William Helena has to take over. Same with Bellerophon, which starts off with Captain John Cook and then becomes Lieutenant William Bryce Cumby's job. And Thunder is also under Lieutenant John Stockham. Now, here's the interesting thing. On the Royal Navy side, on the British side of that, you have these quite junior officers taking command. I'm quite happy to take command, and because they have to, relatively. Yet, on the Franco-Spanish side, they have all these senior officers. I mean, literally, if Nelson had found himself in possession of so many commodores as the Spanish had and the French, he probably would have not been sure what to do with them. He'd have probably been going, why do I have all this gold braid around me? Aren't there other things you need to be doing right now? Like off commanding squadrons and doing your job elsewhere. You know, there are 3 admirals on the Royal Navy side in charge of 27 ships. I think I counted earlier that there were... Let me count again, and you're going to hear me counting again like you did earlier, because I don't trust my notes on this one, and it's every time I look at them I disbelieve it. So there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I still can't understand this. And every time I teach this, every time I talk about this, I can never understand it. They have 13 officers for 33 ships. 33 ships at a line have 13 officers. That's kind of a ratio of like almost 2.5 ships per admiral. There are 3, a commodore, a rear admiral, and a full admiral on one ship alone. Why? It's just too much gold braid. You don't need that many officers if your fleet is working well. It shows the political issue of the fleet. It shows the problems command in the fleet, that they have to have so many senior officers. They can't. It's almost as if they can't trust their captains to be that far away from a senior officer, otherwise they might not know what they're doing. Constantine, I think part of the problem with Napoleon is that he created a system that constantly required more glory and conquest to keep it running. How do you have a meritocracy in a society for long? That is part of the trouble. But you could have slowly transformed it, and he was slowly working, but it would take a lot of time and effort and a large standing army to be paid for. And HMS Mars, first sponsored warship. Hello, Adam Crow. Jim Heaton needed a 14th admiral for luck. Actually, I haven't thought about that till now, but yes, they did. They had 13. That's very unlucky. No wonder the Royal Navy didn't like having so many of them. But they did. They needed to appoint another Commodore or something, or get rid of one. Alarm High X-ray. Hello. That's a lot of brass compared to ships. Their ships must have lost speed for all that brass waiting there. It was, you just look at these. And hi, Shormac. And there are so many of these ships here. And hello, King's Rook. But it's look at these ships. They are, you could. The one which has 3 aboard is the Principe de Asturias, which is a 112 gun 3-decker, so it's a first rate of Spain. It has Admiral Don Pedro Carlos Gravina, technically second in command. Rear Admiral Don Antonio de Escario, and Commodore Rafael de Hor aboard. Seriously. And then there's the Nuestra Senora de la Santissima Trinidad, or more often called the Santissima Trinidad, the four-decker 136 gun of Spain, which is under command of Rear Admiral Baltasar Hidega de Cisneros. Why? You sit there, you look at these things and going, they've got 84, got 80, 136 guns, 80 guns. Then you go down the British list, and the British list is sort of a case of 64, 104, 98, 98, 74, 74, 100, 64, 74, 74, 74, 74, 100, 74, 74, 80, 74, 74, 74, 64, 74, 98, 74, 74, 74, 98. You know, the French one, the French and the Spanish one, they have the sort of it's all focused in on the 74s. They are the far most common ships. They're the third rates, but they have gone to this extra effort of building these far larger ships, and for the most part, they don't do them any good. They have more ships, they have larger ships, they have more top brass, and it doesn't make up for it because they are trying to make up for the weakness they have in the lower ranks by having a lot of senior ranks. So they're going, right then, we are short of senior officers, we are short of sailors, so we'll make up for it by having more senior officers. And it doesn't work that way. You can't fix problems in the lower ranks by filling the top ranks up and making things top heavy. And in many ways, the rank structure is top heavy. Surf Tectonics. 3 flag officers on every ship in the Navy sounds like a comedy. It sounds like a nightmare. Or a very funny comedy, but a nightmare. Carlos, isn't 13 a recently unlucky number? I thought that came after the Friday 13th massacre in Chicago. No, it became because of the 13 people at the Last Supper. Because there were 13 at the Last Supper, that's why it's considered an unlucky number. So one would have thought the Spanish would have been definitely slightly more worried about it. Vision. The French Spanish were like in Star Trek. Everyone gets to be a captain or admiral. By the undiscovered country, the Enterprise has 3 captains on board. Yeah. So basically, Franco-Spanish command structure was the opposite of Nelson's. Micromanage everything. It had to be, in a way. Their experience, their officers, they just didn't have enough. They'd done this sail across the Atlantic and... Carl went, weren't the French and Spanish overgunning the vessels, but with smaller guns? They were, to an extent, trying to overgun their vessels. It did cause them a lot of structural issues. But also, the reason why when British capture French ships and Spanish ships, they tend to reduce their number of guns was because they tended to have carry guns in the place of stores and other things, which, frankly, the British would go, for a couple less guns, we can carry that much more stores. And if we've got to send a ship around the world, we need the stores. Because the British are... Here's the thing. The British have to factor in that they're going to be sitting off on blockade for a long, long time. And they're probably going to be saying hello for a long, long time. So they need the stores. Whereas if you're... And I'm not saying this because of they were trying to get to sea. They were doing a lot of time at sea. Not as much as the British were, but quite... they weren't sort of all the harbour dogs the whole time. But when you are not doing that much as equivalent to sea time, but you're mainly sailing from place to place rather than trying to sit off somewhere, you don't worry about supplies as much. Because you carry the supplies for the journey, then you get there and you can take on more supplies. Ankasano, were these officer commissions purchased? Perhaps there were too many bars and enough ships to... No, they weren't. Naval posts weren't purchased. Not even in the French or Spanish navies at this time. They were never really... It's going to sound strange, but the sea is a great leveler. It doesn't really respect your finances, whereas armies' commissions were purchased up until relatively recently in comparison. Carl hello, I got sausage casserole. Yum, lucky you. So far, I haven't had tea today, but I have had a 40% voucher come through for Pizza Hut, so I think that's where my food's coming from tonight. Off topic, I know. But, so, Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson versus Admiral Pierre-Charles Jean-Baptiste Sylvestre de Villeneuve. And that's the other thing. If we go back to this quickly, I want to draw your eyes to. The fact that the Royal Navy, the British fleet, is commanded by 2 Vice Admirals and a Rear Admiral. The Allied fleet has a French full admiral and a Spanish full admiral. It has 2 Spanish rear admirals, a French rear admiral, and a Spanish vice admiral. And it has, a French vice admiral as well. Pierre-Charles Villeneuve is in charge. He's technically is a vice admiral as well. There's a debate over whether he's an admiral or vice admiral, whether he's promoted afterwards. That's why I list him as an admiral. But it's a fun issue that there are so many and such senior officers there, compared to the British. Again, the British is the Navy which is worrying, technically supposed to be, if you listen to some of the billing. So you have a Vice Admiral in charge, you have a pair of very good Vice Admirals in charge, but you're going to trust that to a pair of Vice Admirals and not send out one of your Admirals? And the reason is because the Admirals are commanding the fleets which are the fight for Britain's life. But the thing is, they are the fleets further back. And if Villeneuve gets his fleet past the Vice Admirals, who will do their best to engage, but if he does get past them, then he has to run into more fleets, who are commanded by people who might not be as dashing or as daring, but are going to be jolly dangerous, and they've got ships at their disposal. So here's the thing for Villeneuve. It's kind of like the Battle of the River Plate scenario all over again. And this is the real strategic lesson from Trafalgar, which I think sometimes gets missed. The idea was, yes, winning is great. It's like the Battle of River Plate. Winning is great. But what matters is you damage and slow the enemy down so that when he bumps into the next fleet, he doesn't get past that. Trafalgar's fought to stop a potential invasion of Britain. It's fought to make it impossible for a French army to get across to Britain, especially one under the command of Napoleon. And that is really the critical thing. If Napoleon can do that, then he can win the war and win it properly. But as long as the fleets aren't united and the fleets can't get united, that's fine. Danhoon. On the Franco-Spanish side, it is because the force is made up of lots of detachments from different ports coming together, and rather than being a big unified force. To an extent, yes. Again, that does mean you have more senior officers, but if you consider how the Royal Navy would have run it versus the French, they would have had, those Commodores would have probably been just the senior captain. And it would be, yeah, go. It's like Nelson, as a senior captain, has commanded operations. As a captain, as a 21-year-old captain, was put in charge of operations because he was the senior captain. So You know, there is a difference going on here. Self-Tractronics. I thought Friday the 13th was the day the French king arrested and executed the Knights Templar to seize all their gold. Made unlucky from some curse of the Grand Master placed on the king and the Pope. Possibly. I think that might be where Friday the 13th comes from, but the 13 being an unlucky number also comes from the Last Supper. Shormack sounds like curse to me. If only the Germans had broken through defensive lines, they would have found there was another one behind that, and another one behind that, and so on. Pretty much. Come, does Battle Trafalgar still have influence on modern doctrine for the RN? That's a question we'll get to. Calm Government, French fleet. How much multilingual nature of the fleet caused issues? Okay, well, you see, this is one of the interesting things because you start talking about multilingual fleets, and people think you're talking about the British one, but actually, there's the fact that the Breton and various linguistics spoken around France were actually quite interestingly strong dialects. The same with British ones, actually, in England and Scotland and the dialects they'd speak. So it takes a while to learn to operate well together and understand it. This is the big advantage the Royal Navy has. Because its ships spend so much time at sea, and have done thanks to these wars, they've had lots of time to iron out the kinks. It doesn't mean every ship works perfectly, but it does give them an advantage for their command structure. Neither of these men would live long after the battle. Horatio and Nelson, of course, died immediately. The battle ended, pretty much. But Villeneuve dies not long after getting released, in interesting circumstances. He disappointed Napoleon. You don't disappoint Napoleon. Which is a shame, because he probably was one of the better admirals than Napoleon actually had access to. Mm-hmm. That's good. I mean, they caused many more casualties than they took, but they failed all their strategic objectives, and the Russians succeeded in their only strategic objective: stop the Germans. I think that's going back to Kursk. Yeah, Kursk is an interesting battle to draw some comparisons to Trafalgar, because if you consider, when you're talking about battles which shape their nations, Trafalgar shapes Britain's perspective in many ways on the world for a long time. Kursk and Stalingrad really do shape the Russian perspective on the world, or the Soviet perspective on the world, as it is for a while. Right. Excuse me a second, I've run out of Irn Bru. Literally going to pop downstairs and get another bottle. Sorry, back. Sorry, that was an emergency. Hello, Jeff Beeler. Mm-hmm. Frederick, he cut his own throat while cowling his hair. He seems to have had multiple stab wounds, according to some reports. Oh, thank you, Jeff. Josie on 100. Hello. I haven't seen you before, so thank you. Welcome. Was this sort of husbanding and micromanaging unique to the French and Spanish fleets of the time, or a result of degradation of both officer corps due to the conflict of internal politics? It's a bit of both, really. It really is a bit of both. They have issues with their internal politics, and they have some issues with lots of things, but they do have some very good officers. Constantinos, Beanie Babies, interesting. Yes, I have a very small collection compared to my girlfriend. So, leaving it, I wanted to just highlight why I haven't done as much on the Battle of Trafalgar on Twitter and all those things, and I talked about it in the introduction, but can add it again. Kate Jameson is Miss Trafalgar. She does amazing stuff on Trafalgar every year. If you haven't read her tweet thread on the Battle of Trafalgar, go read it. But these are two of my favorite tweets. And I love this one from Villeneuve. Villeneuve, to whom do I have the honor of surrendering? Captain Ackley. To Captain Pellew of the Conqueror. Villeneuve. I am glad to have struck to the fortunate Sir Edward Pellew. Captain Ashley. It's his brother, sir. Villeneuve. The brother? What? There are two of them? Hellas! And Don Cosme Chucura of the San Juan Nepomuceno. He was returning to quarterdeck when a cannonball hit his right leg with such violence as to almost take it off, tearing it across the thigh. He fell to the ground, but the next moment made an effort to raise himself, supporting himself on one arm. His face was as white as death, but he said, in a voice that was scarcely weaker than his ordinary tone, "It is nothing. Go on firing." Or, "Esto no es nada. Ciega el fuga." He did all he could to conceal the terrible sufferings of his mangled frame. Nothing would induce him to leave the quarterdeck. Now, the reason I highlight those is I wanted to highlight two things. One, that the French were they were very respectful of each other. They knew the qualities of each other's forces. They didn't view it with dishonor of losing, okay, to the British, or they didn't consider each other. They didn't look down on each other in terms of their capabilities. There's jokes and the things that go around, but they have huge respect. And also, I wanted to emphasize, and the reason I love that tweet is that we often talk about Nelson and wanting his face covered and all these things so people wouldn't see his hurt. And we talk about other officers who hold their posts and officers who died of post. But it was on both sides. There were good officers on all sides. In fact, most of the officers were very hardworking. They might not have had the same amount of sea time as some of their British counterparts, but that doesn't necessarily make them a bad officer. It's very difficult to get to senior command, even with the random times that are going on in terms of the various issues within internally in France and Spain this time, without being quite good at being at sea. And they're good. They try their best. They really do. In Happy, perhaps the French Navy should have taken on Dutch and Danish officers as technical advisors for a while. Honestly, if there'd been enough Dutch and Danish officers to go around, they could have used them, but they were needed for their own ships. Although, considering the Danish experience of Copenhagen just 4 years prior to this and other scenarios, they might not have as many officers to go around. They had probably more officers than they needed for their ships at this point, but, we'll leave that to one side. Consequences. Beanie Babies are teaching assistants. They are. In fact, this one is appropriately called Admiral. So they are teaching assistants when I need to do demonstrations and discussions for my students. They are teaching assistants. Mm-hmm. Lynn Cox. Nape had a marshal who was asked about his riches. He offered to give them away if the questioner would stand at 30 paces while the marshal fired 30 balls at him. I took far worse to get here. Carl Harmon. Had the British been invaded, I envisaged the defence line after line of old men, young soldiers, and Boy Scouts trying to push back Germany. I know it's romantic and not realistic. If Britain's case, it would have possibly worked. Remember, Britain had quite a large army that had managed to get out of Dunkirk, and this is, of course, Second World War we've got into. But if we've been talking about invasion scares, that does sort of fit. There were defensive lines in place. There were various things put in. And here's the thing. Most of Dad's army gets a lot of rap because of the comedy television program. But here's the reality. Most of the Territorial Army were veterans of World War One who knew their areas like the backs of their hands. Quite a lot of them were grandparents. And they were going to be holding ground while their grandchildren, their wives, their daughters got to safety. Here's my point. I am a 60-year-old veteran who's already seen the horrors of a great war. I'm in my own backyard territory I know like the back of my hand. Or it could be a 50-year-old or veteran known like the back of my hand. And my wife and the grandkids, the future of my family, are running away from you with your tanks and your guns. You think I'm going to back down? You think I'm going to give ground? You're going to have to kill every single one of us to get past. We're going to make you bleed. Yes, we're not the first fight of youth. Yes, you're going to outnumber us. Yes, you're going to have all this equipment. But we know the territory and we are going to make you bleed because we don't care. That is the point about the Territorial Army. They were as trained as they could be and all these things, but that didn't really matter. In the end, you're fighting people who are fighting because it's their country, but most importantly, because their family, every second they buy of time, of you having to deal with them, gives their family a greater chance of getting to safety. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to fight them. I'd have to bring... I could beat them. I'd probably bring in artillery and fast support and blast away merrily because that's what I'd have to do. But it would take time. It would take energy, and that's if I was lucky. It would also probably cost me troops because, again, gamekeepers, all these sorts of people who have spent years shooting, suddenly in the forest, they know like their back of the hand, and I've got infantry going through that. I'm going to be... It's guerrilla war I really don't want to get into. Mr. Scooble, hello. Do you think the battle would have been much different if there were all the officers in the French fleet that were in charge before the French Revolution? I think the officers would have been useful. I think what would have been more useful is if they had managed to have more sea time and had managed to get those sailors to a high proficiency. That's the important thing. Hello, Andrew Reynolds. Jeff Healer, what was HMS Africa up to at Trafalgar before going on to chase USS Constitution? She was coming to join Nelson's fleet. And she arrived and decided she wasn't going to form up in line. She was a celebrity, and she was going to make her entrance where she wanted to. And she was going to look glorious doing it. And she really does. She is the celebrity who walks into a party late and goes through the fire exit rather than forming up the queue behind everyone else because she's HMS Africa. There's a party over there. I'm going to go join it. Then, a quick off-topic question for argument. Life jackets in World War One. I remember Drac mentioning that they used to be made with offcuts from cheese making. What was the name, please? Oh, good lord. You've asked me and now I cannot remember. They used to have also cork and all sorts of things, I know. Dunkirk. The famous line isn't have time to bleed from a movie with two governors. Yeah. Pretty rude. Esto no está nada equal tis but a scratch. Or it's nothing, carry on. I like that. I like that. I'm not gonna. I admit I can't do the pronunciations that well. So, I always like it when people try and teach me the pronunciations, and I do my best. Osprey 28, my Irn Bru arrived. Glad, yes. Derp Squad, the food is being cooked downstairs. It smells good. I'm getting hungry. Welcome to most of the Royal Navy. Kingsbrook, I think there were a few Canadian soldiers around to help the going guard as well. There were all sorts of soldiers, and Montgomery was in charge of it for one part. In Abby, do you know what the opinion of Nelson was on the Carronade? HMS Glatton seems to have done very well with them at Copenhagen, converted Inuan. Maybe more in the upper works? Pretty much. The carronades are good weapons if you can get close. Scott, there are also plans to set the beach and shoreline on the fire for the landings to welcome the Germans. Also, yes, the Home Army would have fought a hell of a partisan campaign. Excuse the French there? Yeah. Going on. Re-World War II, Dad's Army. Kind of Japan and girls with bamboo swords. Not sure where that came from. Go on. I know scouts man coastal defences and were supposed to be used if invaded. Do you think they would have been much use? They weren't really doing much more than the Observer Corps. That's what they were doing. I don't think they were going to be used as sort of actual fighting. The idea was there'd be communications and they'd be visible scouting sort of things. So the Winter War on the British Isles, to an extent. There is some mythology about the scouts and manning AA guns and all these sort of things. You do have people who are older getting involved in AA guns, etc., but they're not usually scouts so much as, how can I put this? More sort of like cadet units. Some of the military scouting organizations, which are slightly different. There were more lookouts were used in communications, and there's right. So, I've got these in because of the when I did all the things earlier. Legacy of Trafalgar. Was it Nelson's greatest battle? Now, this is the first thing. And this is the point where I'm going to get into a sort of stuff which... Okay. So far, I have been to dinners where I wasn't the speaker. I've been to, I think, one, possibly two, where I was the speaker. So I can't comment on that one where the speaker was any good. And I've been to about not quite a dozen pickle nights as well. And if you don't know what a pickle night is, it's really, really cool. But it's basically the Trafalgar night dinner is for the officers. The pickle night is for the sailors. And it's to celebrate HMS Pickle bringing the news of the Battle of Trafalgar and of Nelson's death back to the UK. So these are sort of really quite good things. And I would like to start off by saying this. Of those 12 I've been to, 3 had really great speakers. 3 had absolutely terrible speakers. And 6 had people who do what I call the I've got something, I'm quite a good speaker, but I'm going to try and shoehorn Trafalgar into what I want to say. For starters, you don't have to have a Trafalgar Night speech which spends its whole time reciting the Battle of Trafalgar. As I've done so far, I have covered the Battle of Trafalgar, given you quite a bit of detail, but I haven't gone for a blow-by-blow account, because lots of people do that, so I don't see that as me offering anything to you which you couldn't get elsewhere quite easily, and probably done with better graphics than I can manage. I'm still working on my ability with the graphics. I'm getting there, but I'm working on it, and they're still not that great. But they're far better than they were. There has been a whole debate recently about Nelson's legacy and Trafalgar's legacy, and whether or not we should even continue to still have Trafalgar night dinners. I refer to Cunningham, which says it takes 3 years to build a ship, 30 to build a crew, and 300 to build. Well, he says 3 years to build a ship, 300 years to build a tradition. It's 30 years to build a crew, roughly. If you get rid of Trafalgar Night, what tradition will you replace it with? There is already Taranto Night. There's not just Trafalgar Night, there's Taranto Night dinners, and I do like going to the Taranto Night dinners, and occasionally I get invited to talk to them as well. And that's lovely. It's good to have the traditions. But the thing is, the point about the Trafalgar Night, and the ones I've really liked, are the ones who use the Trafalgar Night as a chance to, it's an annual get-together, and it's a chance to think about the lessons of history for modern naval operations. What are the lessons from history you can take to? What are the immutable lessons of history? What can we learn? And yes, some try and artificially use Trafalgar to justify all sorts of modern twaddle. You don't need to do that. You can talk about the modern stuff, and you can talk about how it fits with the immutable lessons which Trafalgar represents and the history of the period, because Trafalgar sits in the context. As I was discussed in the introductions, there's the limitations of sea power, and there's also the advantages of sea power. There's what it brings and what it doesn't bring. These are all things which matter. Someone commented recently on one of my videos. I'll go to the comment section quickly, which I really liked. I think they took it from what I was saying, but they also put in their own sort of thing. And I quite like it when people do that, because it allows me to learn things which I've sort of might not have picked up on me sort of saying, because me, it's something I've said quite a lot, and I think about these things a lot. So it sort of is there. Quite a lot of history, this was quoted by Stephen Conroy, quite a lot of history wants to play into a narrative which comes up after it, not looking at the narrative before it. That is true, and that's especially true with Trafalgar. Trafalgar has a lot of narrative put onto it, but it's not often about what its reality is. And I think one of the issues when we're having this legacy debate, when we're having these debates right now, is we are thinking too much Gushan, the big content, and looking at the micro detail. And sometimes the micro detail people, heroes are imperfect. And as we'll get into part 3, which is entirely only going to be in a live, because I explained all in the context. The context of that legacy matters, and it goes through. Our interpretation of history changes with our time and the context of our time. And so we've got to think about this. Now, as we get into the sort of back to this one question, was Trafalgar Nelson's greatest battle? And I would say it was not. And this is why this video comes after the recorded introduction of part 2 will come out after this live. Vision. If the Americans could defeat British armies in the Revolutionary War and War of 1812, British volunteers and pensioners would have a sort of chance against the French with skill and luck. To be honest, the Americans managed to defeat the British armies in the Revolutionary War or War of 1812 because the French Navy managed to beat the Royal Navy. Carl Barham, would you say it's true the Royal Navy will be evacuated via Pembrokeshire in the event of invasion? It's a myth here. Possibly, but honestly, they'd possibly have been gone from Scotland. Or they wouldn't have gone because they were certainly planning on not go and didn't want to go. But you might have got the princesses out. Very good. Have you went to Pickle Night or Trafalgar dinner? As I said, I've been to both. I quite enjoyed it. The Pickle Nights are... Honestly, I've had fun at both, but the Pickle Nights tend to be slightly more fun. William Cox, I vary from the narrative claiming there was no need to invade Japan unless the Emperor were... yeah, that's going into that war. Jeff Bieler, interesting. Nelson's crews included 123 Black West Indians, 3,507 Irish, 361 Americans, 78 Swedes, 25 Norwegians, 23 Prussians, 9 Russians, 54 Frenchmen, 100 plus Indians, 25 Maltese, and 115 Italians. And that's just the ones we're sure about. You have to remember there were some at the time. Nelson actually got one Haitian general and his servant out from Haiti to get evacuated French on his ship, inducting his crew. And during his time in the West Indies, if a African descent sort of slave got ashore, got onto his ship, they'd be inducted into the crew. They'd join the crew. So if a slave escaped and joined the ship, they were part of they joined the crew. And then Nelson would go, if someone tried to get them back, he'd go, nope, they've taken the Queen's shilling. They belong to the king. Oh, they've taken the King's shilling. They belong to the king now. They belong to the Royal Navy. You can't have them back. That's good. If more experienced French-Spanish admirals had been available, would the French-Spanish admirals have possibly avoided the battle instead of fighting it? You actually don't have a more experienced admiral available than Villeneuve. He is pretty much the best admiral the French have available. But he has a really weird command system going on and all sorts of issues to deal with. And frankly, it's a nightmare. Derp Squad, stop winding up poor Sean Mack. You get into the strategy in the Lake Pacific, and you know he's going to go for it. So this is 1798, the Nile, and this is their first victory. And honestly, this is one of the favorites of Nelson, but you have to actually, when you go down, you have to give Captain Thomas Foley his due, because he's the one who spots the gap between the lead French ship Guerriere and the Northern Shoal, and that's what allows him to get round. And again, you have to look at the fleet that's involved, and the British are pretty much all 74s. And well, there's Leander, which is a 64 or a 50. I think she's 50. She's a 50. But Nelson's big thing here is that as a rear admiral, he sees the French, he goes for it. He doesn't wait. And the big interesting thing is that they've been chasing the French backwards and forwards. And we were talking earlier about the speed of ships, okay? So the Royal Navy ships had actually been chasing after the French when they got out of Toulon and managed to overtake them, reached Egypt, the family weren't there and presumed they were going somewhere else, so went back across the Mediterranean to try and track down. And then the the French turn up in Egypt after the British Navy has already been and gone. So, A, that shows you how slow the troop ships of the French were going. B, that shows you how fast the Royal Navy were, that they managed to overtake from behind, and then they went off. And they missed them. That's good. I was considering the ones who had ended up lying on the guillotine. Oh, if a few of those had been still around, instead of dead, they would have probably been quite successful. According to Nelson's Navy by Brian Levy, the Navy recruited many Swiss into the Marines. They had Swiss in the Marines. They had Danish in the Marines. I do believe at the Battle of Copenhagen, some of the Royal Marines who helped with actually leading the attack knew Copenhagen very well because they'd been born there. The British were very equal opportunities employers. If you want to come fight for us and you're prepared to shoot whoever we tell you to, we'll take you. Hello, Roland Cash. It's it's a good it's an interesting force, and as I made a point in the introduction, there is discrimination in the Navy at this point, but the big discrimination is not ethnicity or the others, although I'm sure there are individuals you can find and account you can find of people doing that way. No, the really big form of discrimination is based on whether you're a landsman or a sailor. And then if you're a topman. If you are a top man, there is a reason. If you consider the top dog, top man, this is still that comes from the Navy, because if you could get up the topsails and were good enough to do them, you were the pinnacle of being a sailor. You were the top man. And that's where it comes from. Mm-hmm. Carl Harmon, I missed your reply. What do you think that a myth that the Royal Navy family would have evacuated by a premature invader? It's one possible place they could have gone out through. They could have also gone out through Liverpool or Scotland, as I think I said. I also think, in nicest way, the royal family trying to get the king to leave would have been interesting. The queen would probably have stayed with him. And so I think it's the princesses who'd be going. How they'd have got them out, I'm not sure. Whether it would have been very fast cruise liner, if there was one available, or battleship or submarine, depends on your perspective. There is actually part of me which thinks it might have been a Refuser class cruiser, because quite often when they end up at sea, it does seem to be the royal family does end up on Arethusa class light cruisers, fast, small, quite well armored and quite well protected. Axon, what were the duties of the top of the main sailor? They'd go up to the top, really the top. So if you are looking at the sails on and the mast and rigging on a ship of the line, and you're looking right up at the top sails, right at the real top, that's where those are the sails. Are the people who go up there are topmen, and they have to be the best of the best because they are very, very high up above the ship in wind and all weathers, managing the sails. They have to be the ones who can do it almost with their eyes closed, dangling on. It's a level beyond anything. The equivalent you can probably talk about in modern times would have been those gentlemen who used to walk around the steeljacks on skyscrapers when they were building them up. They would walk around on a bit of steel in flimsy high winds and all those sort of things. And Dan Freeman, Dover Castle isn't all that easy to take. London would have been the death trap urban environment. Plus, there are quite a lot of fortifications on the way to London. It's things like Box Hill, which has a nice big fort on top of it. And I would not like to try and take Box Hill off a defended force that's dug in. Plus, they had various military canals and all sorts of things to defend. King's Rook. If the Royal Navy evacuated, if the Royal Family evacuated, would they have headed for Canada, as everyone seems to say? Yes. Kind of like the Portuguese in this period. Their king evacuated to Brazil, then decided he preferred running Brazil than Portugal because Brazil was many times larger and a lot easier to deal with. Ryan Cash, I've read a lot about Villeneuve and his leadership skills, but know nothing about the Spanish commander Trafalgar. Who was he in? Was he a non-entity? He wasn't a non-entity, but he wasn't exactly. How do I put this? Let me just check his exact name so I don't get it wrong. He is Admiral Don Federico Carlos Gravina, and Gravina is. How do I put this politely? Well, he dies after the battle, but his previous experiences had been the Siege of Gibraltar, the capture of HMS St. Femin, the invasion of Minorca, the Siege of Toulon, and then it's the Battle of Trafalgar. So he's not exactly had a lot of, you and I would call naval command. But, unlike Nelson, he does manage to do quite well with amphibious operations. Well, broadly speaking. Ben Grogan, speaking of tops, a layman's question. In real terms, how much flex did the mast suffer in gust conditions? Not just the wind moving, but, the mast moving underneath. Well, that... Okay. So... There are some people who have talked about it moving as much as a foot each way. Most estimates seem to think it's a tolerance about 6 inches for it to sort of the top mast to actually tip the top of the mast sort of to move roughly 6 inches. But I am sometimes skeptical because I'm thinking about the tolerances of wood and how much that will hold. But then again, you realize how long the mast is. So moving that much is not that long a lot. It depends, basically. Strength of the winds. And how well the mast is made and what wood it is made of. If it's made of prime Norwegian wood, probably spruce or fir, it can take a lot and still be okay. Take care, Sab Thompson. Harmon, had Britain been invaded, how large a force would take the Royals away, and had defence failed to do you think they would scuttle leave to Canada? Oof. They'd all try to get as much as they could out to Canada if Britain was going to fall completely. That was what the Royal Navy had plans for, if necessary, to withdraw to Canada. So, Copenhagen round 1. There was no remedy for motion sickness. Now, I like the Battle of Copenhagen for some reason. It is not really, again, a battle which Nelson gets to exercise, I would call his innovative abilities of command. But again, one where he gets to support things. Now, I've talked about before the signal of retreat, which Parker issues. It's come up. And there is a great quote in Pocock. Which was the account published in 1987, so year of my birth, that apparently had, I will make the signal of recall for Nelson's sake. If he's in condition to continue action, he'll design it and disregard it. If he's not, it will be an excuse for his retreat and no blame can be attributed to him. Remember, we've talked before about the Articles of War and the fact that the requirements for all officers to do their utmost to engage the enemy in battle. What is interesting is during the battle is that actually only one officer, Rio, Captain Rio, who was in charge of, I'm trying to remember which one Captain Rio was in charge of. Edward Rio was in charge of the Amazon, a 38-gun frigate. Actually decides to withdraw on the order because he claims he can't see Nelson's ship, so was therefore following orders. All the rest do. There you can see Elephant. I've circled her. She gets right into the middle. And the attack on Copenhagen is a classic example of the Royal Navy just going in. It's another battle which I would love to be looked at more because it's pretty much the Royal Navy going, we know we are going to be facing problems. We know there are land fortifications, and historically land fortifications are quite strong versus ships. We know there's all these things. We know that, but we know also that the fleet's a mixture that we're going to be facing, and we think we can take it. And they do. And they do their jolly best. Jeff Beeler, interesting. Temeraire was soon alongside the Redoubtable, who described her broadside as murderous. In under half an hour, out of 634 men, 300 were killed and 2,200 wounded, nearly all her officers. Yep. That is a child. It's a very good year. No, when I really want that, Vision, Dan, whenever I want to make people feel really old, I tend to point out that I've had my PhD now for... Well, I was 25 when I took the exam, and I was about 26 when I graduated. So I've technically had the PhD fully for the last 7 years. That's the fun. Eric, England brought lumber from Norway since 1590 at least. My ancestor George White came from London, England in 1590, started exporting wood. Most was probably used for building ships. A lot was used for building masts. The best wood for masts came from Norway and Canada. The wood for the sides of the ships came from mostly various forests in the UK. The thing was, if you ever go to Portsmouth, you can actually see some of the docks, and they look quite strange. You're sort of going, why are they that shape? Why aren't they sort of connected to the sea? It's because they actually used the salt water in the docks to season some of the masts and some of the wood, and when actually put it in the water. See, yeah, make them better at resisting at surviving at sea. Jevila, where does Trafalgar rank in the history of foreign invasions of Britain? Well, seeing as there are no troops actually there, it's just the fleet part. It's probably one of the lower threat ones. Owen Cash, Was this Nelson's ancestor worked as Beatty's flag officer? Nelson's descendant? No. I have a feeling Nelson's descendant, if they'd been working as BT's flag officer at Jutland, they'd have been slightly more, Death Squad, I already feel old most of the time. You don't need to try harder. Step track. After Trafalgar, is that when the Queen had sent RN privateers to the Caribbean to raid Spanish? That was the Armada. That was a long time ago. At this point, it's King George, one of the others, I think. And they're doing quite well. Constant I'm going on 4 years. The American system is lengthy. It is, and it's weird in some of the things, because mine was 3 years writing, researching time, and then there's another year added on in terms of it took time to get examinations organized, and then I had to do some minor corrections, which included visiting a photographic archive, which I hadn't even realized existed. William Cox, is it better to concentrate on the opponent's top hamper, change shot and so on, or to the enemy's sides? Which way takes her out of action quicker? Depends if you want to capture the ship. If you take out her masts, she can't go anywhere. You can position yourself so you can rake her from the stern, killing most of her crew, and then take her and then capture her for money. Dr. Clark, my boss was in uni when I was born. I make her feel old. Oh, that's cruel. Then for almost all Napoleon was Holden, King was King George III, but at times there was a regency by the future King George IV. That is one of the issues I have sometimes. And honestly, I'm more interested in the ships and the battles going on than I am in which particular George is in charge. Vision, what was the greatest invasion threat Britain? Even after Dunkirk, Germany lacked the ability for successful invasion due to our own strength and naval weakness. Were others a closer run thing? The Armada. The Armada is pretty much... Since the Armada, we've been fairly okay at dealing with invasion threats. Jeffy, seeing a young Kate Jameson in her Twitter pic looks like she got her PhD on her 21st birthday. She hasn't got her PhD yet. I'm encouraging her to do it. She's doing her master's at the moment. And she keeps talking about potentially doing a PhD, and I'm hoping she does go for one, because she'd be a very, very good PhD to have, having one. And I'd hope someday she might even go into lecturing, although I know she really does enjoy her job she's currently doing. But I think she'd be a very good university lecturer. Right then. Back in a second. Oh, ay, caramba. Wait now. There you go. Ah, yes. Battle of Cape St. Vincent. Now, the Battle of Cape St. Vincent is possibly Nelson being one of the most Nelson he ever is. And he gets to do this great thing where he captures first the San Nicolas, because Captain, his ship, has pretty much had its mast shot away, is pretty much unmaneuverable, so They smash into the San Nicolas and they board and take that. And when he's aboard the San Nicolas, the San Josef decides to get tangled up in the San Nicolas. And so, well, he's got a bridge. Yay! To the San Josef. Oh. And catches a second ship. Now, there is a lot made of this that they said to go, well, if he hadn't managed to be successful and all these things, he would have been court-martialed and all sorts of things. I doubt Jervis would have actually done it. Yes, he was technically disobeying the letter of the orders being given, but not the spirit of the orders. And frankly, Jervis was happy with results and people trying to get to the enemy. Let's see. We can talk about the Union another time. Consider this. The only Royal Navy class I took, I was the only person on the age of 40, saved the teacher. Ooh, fun times. Seth Thompson. Well, you make the most of those 18 months. You can use them for a lot of things. That's good. Nelson at Cape St. Vincent. Nice ship. I'll take it. Pretty much. It's a patented methodology. I think Vian would have been quite happy to have tried to done something similar with the Almark incident, and I'm dang sure that there were certain tribal captains who were trying to take home as many Italian cruisers as they could get their hands on, but Cunningham wouldn't let them. Yeah. Star Trek, Surf Trek Tectonics. Why not the UK remake Commonwealth with Canada and Australia instead of the EU, or is that impossible? I think the Commonwealth is still going, and the Commonwealth's still there, and they're still doing things with Canada and Australia and all these things going on. There's a lot of talk about CANZUC and various other organisations at the moment, so we'll see what happens. The world is interesting. Let the world be interesting, but let's enjoy the interest of history. Constant drowsiness. American ships have to outrun RN warships in the Caribbean like Nelson's, and that's probably why they got to be so much faster than the competition in the long run with trade in Asia as well. Possibly, but also when you're dealing with the distances of Pacific, you want to cut down your time at sea. But if you can cut down your time at sea on long range trips, you are more likely to make it there and avoid storms. JBL, what was Nelson's reputation before St. Vincent? Well, it was quite good, but we will get into it. St. Vincent is a really good battle for him, but this is Nelson's overall scorecard. So wins: Trafalgar, Copenhagen, Niall, St. Vincent, Hayes Islands, Genoa, and the Siege of Calvi. Broadly speaking, we'll call the Siege of Calvi, broadly speaking, a win. Losses: Boulogne, Malta, Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Cadiz, Grand Turk, and San Juan. San Juan, he's 21 years old. So here's the point. Nelson loses. Yes, he wins some very big battles, and actually, Cape St. Vincent is a good battle. Niall, Copenhagen, Trafalgar, these are very good battles, which he wins. And he does quite well before that. But he'd had failures. he had lost battles or failed expeditions. And he still got promoted. So here's something which I consider a legacy of Trafalgar, which isn't discussed enough. You can fail and still get ahead. In fact, as long as you learn from those mistakes and you don't repeat the same mistakes, preferably, you are actually good to go to command. If you consider the great victories which Nelson achieves, Nile, Copenhagen, Trafalgar, all these three. If he hadn't had the failures, would he have achieved them? And yes, it is easy to point out that most of those failures are land battles, which a naval officer getting involved is always an interesting scenario. But they're still failures. And they don't blot his copybook. He still gets on because he's still considered a good officer. He's a hard-working officer, and he's good. If you consider the modern navies, the modern, how many officers do you think about it have to strive to be perfect, or do not want to risk doing something slightly off the rule or slightly out of the thing out of the playbooks? Because if they do and it goes wrong, they will get kicked out. Whereas if they stick to the rule book, they won't lose their job. Even if it goes wrong, they won't lose their job, and they will not, lose their pension on these things. There has got to be, to an extent, a tolerance of certain amount of failure. Because the enemy has a vote. The logistics has a vote. And that's one of the reasons why I put the siege of Malta. He turns up to help. He has some issues here. He doesn't really do much other than get really annoyed with Trowbridge and Emma Hamilton. The former takes the flagship too close to the shore batteries, so they're firing at them. And Emma Hamilton refuses to go below, so is actually on the deck getting fired at. And this really annoys Nelson for some reason. The Battle of Grand Turk. While still captain of the HMS Almal, a 28-gun frigate, is sent with 100-plus troops, plus normal crew, to recover the islands. He also has the 14-gun brig sloop HMS Drake with him, and the 28-gun frigate HMS Tartar, which decides it's not going to be involved in the fight for some reason, and they manage to lose, because it turns out that the troops there have about 400 to 500 soldiers ashore, plus various form artillery dug in. San Juan expedition. The naval expedition was put under charge of the 21-year-old Captain Nelson. The land side and overall mission command was Captain, sort of brevet major, Paulson of the army. Defeated by logistics and sickness more than Spanish action. They managed to conquer the fort, but they were also sick and ill. They couldn't do more than just leave and burn the fort behind them. It happens. Let's go. Talking of capturing ships, at the Battle of Cape Matapan, why didn't the RN try to capture the Palma Fumanzara? I'm sure having 3 battleships close range would focus mind. Well, actually, the tribals did try to capture the Polar, but Cunningham said no, because A, getting it home would have been quite difficult. B, once you got it home, what do you do with it? It's a prize, but you can't really do much with it. You don't have shells of the right caliber. You don't have spare parts to keep it running. It's just a trophy, and if it's going to take a lot of effort to get it home, and it could delay you, and you could end up getting subjected to a lot of air attacks for it. And see, it's just a trophy. But there again, they would have liked it. Sure, I am watching the role-playing game. I'm not taking part at the moment because I've been so busy, but I'm watching it with a lot of interest, and I'm enjoying what Paul's managed to do it. And they've apparently you captured Enigma on the 18th of March, 1940. Cool. That was would be an early birthday present. So, Tectonics. Yeah, I'm not getting into that one today. Ghost fail upwards, maybe not such a bad idea. It's more about having trust that you can think outside the box and you won't lose your whole career. Death Squad, I think that as long as the plan was competent and the reactions to events were competent, given the information available, no reason to discipline the officer. That's what was definitely the thing then. But if you consider these days, one of the interesting things I've noticed, and okay, I'm going to pick on the US Navy to an extent here because they've got the most recent examples. But you have examples of accidents taking place where officers seem to be almost afraid to carry out on initiative what's going on, to deal with what's going on, either because they don't experience it, because if they make the wrong decision, they're going to lose their careers, even if they don't end up. They're waiting for senior officers to come up, and that means time passes. And remember, the amount of times I've said the biggest, most dangerous thing you can do in war is hesitate, because that gives the enemy time to think, and that can mean you lose. It's also tends to be the most dangerous thing you can do in an emergency. Yes, you need to think before you act, but if your thought process is, I must get someone else in here to make this decision, rather than this information is in front of me and I'm not going to make the decision, I'm going to wait for someone else. That's hesitation. And you're doing that because you don't have to feel you have the authority to take a decision. Because if you do take the decision and it goes wrong, you're lost. Your career's over. Definitely. Is it just me that sees the tribals as being like over-enthusiastic dogs in this context? Maybe the tribals could have... that pretty much was what the both tribal destroyers were planning to do. It was the tribal destroyers who had found Polar and basically were going, hello, you're ours. Cunningham was sort of going, I need battleships here immediately to control my destroyers. Calum Guzman, Reed Nelson losing engagements. Can you name an occasion when he refused to engage and why? Not really. He didn't really refuse to engage. He sometimes picked his time for engage, but usually his time to engage was to go in as quickly as he could, because he didn't want to give his enemy time to prepare. Because usually, for example, like at the Nile, time works to your enemy's advantage, not to yours when you're attacking. Hello, Konzad. So Nelson lost basically when it involved anything concerning land, like a reverse Mongol horde. Possibly. Mm-hmm. That's good. I think the issue about junior officers hesitating might be due to a number of times that junior officers made frankly stupid decisions. I agree. There are strictures because they have made but the thing is, the number of times they made that stupid decisions have been made versus the times that intelligent decisions have been made. The stupid decisions get a lot more attention than the intelligent ones, because the intelligent ones often don't lead to anything, whereas the stupid ones tend to lead to court-martials. Vision, to your point on the USN, Nimitz, the lieutenant, was court-martialed for running his destroyer gunboat onto a sandbar in the Philippines. Few other famous officers had embarrassing incidents. Lots of them had. Vian managed to mangle up 2 destroyers in his career and still got to be Admiral of the Fleet. It's, it happens. Constant, my apologies. If it has been addressed, which ship was more preeminent in the day? USS Constitution versus your pick Razay frigate? I'm going to guess it comes down to commanders. It does. I would honestly, if I was going to take on the Constitution and I was in a Razé, it depends on luck. It depends to an extent on luck. If I have a good commander, and if I'm a good commander and I'm experienced at sea, and I can get round her, yeah, I can win. She might win, is there? That squad. One that sticks in my mind is the submarine that was near trawlers, knowingly so, got stuck in something, so dived. In doing so, dragged a trawler under. Yeah. As there are problems with junior officers who've made the wrong decisions, yes. But also, you have to think about it. If you've instructed your junior officers well, if you've trained them well, the whole point of being, let's say, a watch-keeping officer is you're supposed to be qualified to keep the watch. You either trust them to keep the watch, or they're just someone standing there, i.e., another sailor, in which case they can be any sailor standing there, just shouting out orders. And if there's a problem, they call the XL, the captain. That's right. I'm Murray. More should be made of the officers that do the right things, and others would try to emulate and use the institutional knowledge rather than avoid decision due to fear. Yeah, that's the point I'm making. You need to try to make thing of the officers who make the right choice. I need to promote them and give them the confidence to make the choices. Because actually, when I talk to most of the junior officers, etc., they know the right thing. They just need the confidence to do it. But no, I know there are some who say Nelson's decision to sail for West Indies wasn't sound. And a safe decision would be to link up with Cornwallis. There's always safer decisions. But your job isn't, as a Navy, isn't always to make the safe decision. It's to sail into harm's way. And sometimes, if you can defeat the French and Spanish fleet, the combined fleet, further away from the UK, the further away you can defeat it, the more damage you can do to it earlier, the more you deal the threat. That's the point. That's why he was doing it. That's why he's chasing it. As I said, it's the same theory as it goes into Battle River Plate. You damage that fleet, it doesn't matter if you get lost, because you damage that fleet enough that they aren't going to beat up Cornwallis's fleet. Hold on, maybe you can explain this, Dr. Clark. I have a friend who's a CPO on a US nuclear aircraft who thinks that the thought of his stay wearing camouflage is ridiculous. Why camo? I have no idea, and I agree with him. Frankly, I think it's just because people got obsessed with looking martial. It's kind of like during the Napoleonic period and this period. Lots of naval officers were upset that the Royal Navy had gone with blue rather than a more martial red because it didn't look cool, and people weren't sure if they actually fought. And the thing was, they did, and blue became the colour, and now they're very happy with it. Tom Thompson, hope you enjoyed my Seafarer vs. Sailor comment, Doc. Yeah, I did. What's good on? That's good. Also, mistakes are going to be made. As long as they're not due to obvious incompetence, they should be used as teaching opportunities. Punishing mistakes make people hide them. Yeah, that's an even bigger problem when people start hiding mistakes. Jeff Pillow, what was the point of Villeneuve going to the Caribbean? He was actually trying to get, saying many ways, he's trying to give his fleet experience at sea. He's trying to draw preferably Nelson's fleet and possibly Cornwallis's fleet to chase after him so he can get back and link up in Brest. That's what he wanted to do. But he didn't manage to make it, partially because Nelson is so hot on his tail, partially because of the quality of his fleet, and it's also, and they need sea time. They need that cruise is incredibly important. Villeneuve's, the quality of his sailing, thanks to that cruise to the Caribbean, about where the fleet's sailing and handling, thanks to that cruise, went up tremendously. So now we're into the legacy. So this is during the Collingwood era. Trafalgar's a great victory. Well, hey, we're all happy, but the war's still going on. Napoleon's still in power. He wins Austerlitz not long afterwards. Britain has controlled the sea, but they're still fighting the same wars, and the wars go on. In fact, in many ways, Trafalgar at the time is considered a great victory, and everyone's upset because their great hero has died. It's kind of like a perfect Shakespearean play in that the great hero, the savior, has died. At the point of it allows you to expunge so much of his personal life. It allows you to get rid of, if he'd lived, he'd have been complicated to deal with because of his personal life. He died, he can be deified. You could ignore things. Mm. Then we have during the age of Hornby and Parker, Victorian Navy. They needed a foundation myth. They're going through time and changes. By the way, Parker is the guy on the lower point, then there's Hornby. And Parker actually is before Hornby, but Hornby I prefer the picture of. The Navy's changing. They're becoming a global policing tool. The empire's growing. They're transitioning to steam. Then they're transitioning to ironclad. They're transitioning in their guns to much more powerful, much more dangerous weapons. They need a foundation myth. Think about the period after the Battle of Trafalgar. Think about the great naval battles which take place. Can you think of any? Really massive naval battles which take place. When there aren't two powers actively vying for control of the world, how often are there massive naval battles? This is why I say people to get worried now, because there is another power vying for control of the world. So the odds are there are going to be naval battles again, because you control your region on land, you control the world by sea. Trafalgar becomes this ideal victory, even though Nile, very, very good, only 4 ships escape in the Nile. All these things, Trafalgar becomes this sort of myth. And Nelson gets burnished up even more because of that. Because they need the myth. Because they need it as the rallying cry. Because they haven't got the battles. So what they need is the memory of it. The mythology of it. Mm-hmm. Plus, what happened to Nelson's descendants? I think some are still serving in the Navy. Various things. Star Trek Torrance, did Iran use fire ram ships, or was that the Spanish Armada? The ram ship, the fire ships are at Armada, not Trafalgar. Emma Hamilton and Horatia suffered from it sweeping under the carpet of Nelson's less family-friendly tendencies. That they certainly did. And what's interesting is he actually asks his friends to take care of Horatia and take care of Emma, but, some of them do, some less so. Then there's Fisher. Okay, so the Victorian age ends, and you've got the world, and then the fleet transitioning again from ironclad steam to the age of dreadnought. This becomes about. You've got the pre-dreadnoughts and all these things. You've got the growth in range of guns. Nelson and Trafalgar becomes a rallying cry, an ideal for the Navy standard. Basically, the further you get away from Trafalgar, the more of a rallying cry it becomes, because the Navy needs that as its battle ideal. What is its ideal it's looking for? But that's a emotional ideal, not a realistic. You have to imagine Trafalgar is the emotional touchstone. Trafalgar and Nelson are these things which you can hold up as ideals of how an officer should act. And Nelson gets overblown as people talking about him being a maverick. He's not as much of a maverick as people sometimes like to ascribe him being. He is actually, for the time, yes, he's a convention, but lots of officers. There's Collingwood at the Battle of Cape St. Vincent as well, who also turns his ship round and does something completely different. He just takes longer to get to the enemy than Nelson does, and Trowbridge and other officers. So lots of people do exactly the same thing as Nelson, and none of them get in trouble for it because that is what's expected of them. They're expected to act within the rules to an extent, but they're also expected to be engaging the enemy. They're expected to be thinking. And that's the thing. Nelson isn't so much a maverick as a thinking officer, but the trouble is he's been held up as a maverick now for so long and such a great ideal and all this thing that people conceive him as this, when in fact he's just a thinking officer, which is what everyone should be encouraged to do. And part of the real reason for this is because of the very strict technical discipline, which has to be maintained in an age of technological uncertainty. And also, when you have ships which have such differing performance levels, okay, during the Ironclad age, during the transition to the Dreadnought age, and all these things, the ships you have going into service, to coordinate them requires quite tight control. The reason it requires tight control is you might have ships capable of doing some ships capable of one speed, other ships capable of another speed, and they might be affected by weather differently. So if you've got to keep them working together, you have to keep quite tight control to keep those ships under control because of the speeds they have built in. It's only once you get later you can start to innovate again. But the trouble is, at that point, there is in many ways the mythology and narrative have been fixed. Mm-hmm. Colin said, "Big CS Forrester plan. If Captain Pellew was a real officer, who's Hornblower based on?" There's a few officers who I think Hornblower could be based on. Junior officers who've gone. Pellew as a real officer. I don't know. Captain Pellew is based on actually the Pellews. I would say Hornblower to a bit is based on Sydney, Captain Sydney Smith. Kieran Kasma, hello. How do you explain the change of Nelson as a way to be flexible and stuff to Swift to Nelson as an ideal after Tira, Tran winning with blindly obeying to command and no personal. You win. Sometimes actually being the flexible sort of officer is not. Sometimes sometimes the smart thing in a scenario to do is actually just to follow the orders, because that is the best way to use your forces. An intelligence officer knows when it's best to adapt their orders and when it's best to follow those orders. That's what you train them to hopefully be able to do. That's good. One of my fluffy research assistants is currently hiding in a big shopping bag. That doesn't surprise me somehow. During the Age of Cunningham. Now, here's the real setting of the deal of Trafalgar becoming what we consider it in many ways when we talk about it today. Jutland. Trafalgar was this clear-cut, almost absolute victory. Yes, the reality is the war continues on, and therefore da-da-da-da-da. But the Battle of Trafalgar itself is viewed in these sort of clear-cut terms. It's this great, glorious victory. And they'd been expecting it. They'd been expecting Jellicoe to get it at Jutland. And, of course, the reality is wars are rarely quite that so clear-cut and so nice. The enemy has a vote. Trafalgar therefore becomes even more popular and more important post Jutland. And again, it's more an emotional touchstone than a real one. People aren't seriously looking at going, I want to reenact Trafalgar. They're not seriously wanting to reenact Jutland either. The thing is, it's a touchstone. So when you're having your Trafalgar night dinners, they're about having history, a tradition, and reminding people of that tradition because that's important. Tradition is tradition is something which binds you, which helps motivate you, which helps provide you with a. If used positively, that's all this. It helps provide you with something which is your common cause to bind you all together. It also provides an opportunity to discuss naval history, to discuss these things and look back on it and learn from it as you go forward. Because history is the best way to teach your people strategy and decision making and the problems they're going to face. But it's got to be looked at critically and it's got to be looked at properly. And my fear is when some people start going about, oh, we need to get rid of this because, we don't like this or that something. That is the wrong way to approach history and the wrong way to approach a tradition. Because the moment you get rid of a tradition, it's very rare you replace it with anything else. In fact, I can't really think of anything any time when some point of tradition has been got rid of and it has been replaced. Now, some points of tradition, yeah, I can understand getting rid of them and I'm supportive because they are wrong in so many ways. Let's say if we went, discrimination or those things, yeah. But a tradition of having a dinner once a year to honor a great victory, I don't see that as a problem. To talk about naval history, I don't see that as a problem. I see it as a problem when people try, as I've said before, and artificially massage that history to fit a current point, because that's going to produce a bad speech. I see it as a problem when people bring in actual people who are actually bad speakers. And you sit there and go, why have you invited this person to this Trafalgar night dinner? Why? They are terrible. And sometimes, but if you get good speakers and if you get good content, you can actually use that tradition to elevate your force's thinking and help. During the age of Radican, Nelson is now a complicated figure. That's great. I want him to be a complicated figure again. I don't like him being a simple figure because Nelson as a complicated figure makes him real. And if he's real, then we can properly examine it. That people might have things which we don't like or we like. I know with the letter, there's actually a question mark over its authenticity, but that we'll see how it checks out at. There's also all sorts of other things about what he did, his actions versus what apparently he wrote, if he did write it. And there's also, I'll leave that to one side. But looking at is good because it's getting back to being the reality he always was. And Trafalgar always was a battle in its context. And these things need to be examined in their context. But I wonder sometimes if the trouble is that we've had such a long run of pure thinking. And the thing is, I love working with scientists and engineers. But the great thing is when you're doing lab testing is there is an absolute. There is a positive and negative. There is a result, which is provable and verifiable. When you're doing history and strategy, sometimes you'll do the same thing 100 times and you'll get a slightly different response every single time. And the thing is, humanities is a tougher discussion. So actually, I think perhaps the simplification has been where the problems come from, rather than the full looking at it and around. And I think complicated is good because we need to start looking at things uncomplicated, because especially we need to look at his failures and successes, because perfection and holding people to a perfect standard is a way to cause so many troubles to a force. They either start hiding mistakes, could end up hiding mental health issues, all sorts of things. You can't do it. So don't do it. Let our figures be, let heroes be complicated, let history be complicated, and learn from the complicated, because that is the best way to have the best force today. Right, I'll be back in a second. I'm just, well, as you all know, I'm on my second bottle of Irn Bru today. Right, let's see what the questions are. Dan Freeman, George Santan, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Historians condemned to watch it. Kiragasma, I think one of the assets of Trafalgar, besides total win of Nelson, is that Nelson died on the process, so England has not had to deal with a powerful hero but an inspiring martyr, which is quite better. Does make things easier, sadly enough. Jeff Baylor, can we talk about this? 5 ships of the Royal Navy have been named HMS Trafalgar after Battle of Trafalgar. 2 ships of the line, 1 ironclad, 1 battle class destroyer, and 1 nuclear sub. Yeah, that's how Trafalgar's been remembered, and also shows what's important at the time. What gets called what. Dunrican Hammer. History is an art, a craft, not really a science. True. And Lionheart X-Ray. Elton Nelson complicated, aka normal human. I know, that's so shocking. William Cox. History is interpretation perspective. Both of these change with the times. Lousiness. My problem with the way history has been portrayed lately is that people have invested everything into a particular set narrative and now are blind to anything else and only seeking confirmation bias. That is often the problem, which is one of the reasons why I'm so worried about access to the National Archives, because one of the key areas you can go to find out the truth, or rather what the official records say, which is usually the truth in Britain's case, because our official records tend to be fairly accurate, or at least provide a fairly good basis for going and finding out the story. It's problematic when access is so limited. Take care, Buccaneer. Enjoy. Good luck with your family. Dan Freeman, you need to hang out more with medics. We combine science and humanity. I actually hang out with quite a lot of medics. I would agree with that about the nurses. Most of the surgeons I hang out with occasionally, frankly, are they're nice people. Vision, the military is an exception. Watched Spaceballs yesterday, carrying on with US Air Force tradition. We are creating new ones during base. Cool. Ironheart X-ray. Any plans on another ship named Nelson? Not sure. Not sure. I think we have a base named Nelson at the moment. I'm trying to remember from memory. I think it's now a naval base. It's Portsmouth. Yeah, Portsmouth is otherwise known as Nelson or Pompey. That's good. Nelson also had the help of being made into a national hero in the early Victorian era as part of the attempts to create a British unifying national myth. That does assist with things. Vision. The UK just seems to do so many things socially that are traditional and entirely foreign to me in the USA. But we used to do decades ago, like dressing formally in black for funerals. Depends whose funerals you're going to. There is a whole subculture and culture within the UK of various things of people, and they dress very colourfully going to funerals to celebrate the life, etc. Depends on your perspective. My dad certainly, for his funeral, would have preferred us all to be very brightly coloured, because he liked to wear very bright, vivid ties. It's possibly where I picked up the habit. Looking at my tie collection, yeah, got some fairly bright ones neck there. Oh yeah. So this is what when I'm wearing suits. This is the sort of thing I'm normally wearing. Or if any of you see me on thing, I think I have my tie from. There, going around this one from the what was it called? The program Mysteries of the Deep. Yeah, it was a bright blue tie, but yeah, normally quite bright ties. You know, depends on us. Yeah. Colin's dad, all I know is I'm Irish Welsh, which means I can debate with anyone while shooting a longbow. Good times, then. Oh. But no. So, any questions? What else we got coming up? Let's see. 25th, we have. I think we've changed some of these things around from memory. Oh, I think that's the old list, slightly out of date. I uploaded the wrong one. And I was right about the 27th. That is the Treaty of London, and amphibian class cruisers is the 29th. But from memory, if I go check the videos, yeah, the ships that Fisher scrapped is now the 5th of November. Because I noticed it was the same day as this one was, so I moved it. Interesting trivia. Nelson was interned in a crypt with a sarcophagus originally carved for Cardinal Wolsey. It had been previously taken over over for the tomb of Henry VIII, which was never completed. So, Max, since we may be on similar, why was quad mount torpedoes used in 5-inch 38 versus 4-inch? The US Navy preferred the 5-inch 38 versus the 4.5-inch because they preferred a bigger gun. Basically, it depends if you're looking for a more general purpose or you're looking for an anti-ship gun, which you then turn into a general purpose gun, or if you're in British case, trying to make it as rapid firing general purpose gun as possible. And quad mount torpedoes, because the more torpedoes you can get on single mount, the more likely you are to hit the target. Surf Techtonics. Does British education refer to the American Revolution as colonial civil war? No, we call it the American War for Independence. Sure, Mike. Sorry, for clarify, quad torpedoes for the tribals. Literally, if you're because they were going down a launcher, because so they were not having two sets of torpedoes, they decided to go with quads. From memory, actually. Yeah. Basically, it's a quad because you can. And then some of the I-class subsequently had quintuple launchers. So they can launch a 10 torpedo spread. Which is always fun to take on. Basically, the idea is always with torpedoes, the more you can launch in one go, the better. Hence, the T-class submarines. Yeah, HMS Nelson was a 120-gun first-rate launched in 1814, converted to screw propulsion and rearmed to 90 guns in 1860. Was handed over to the Dominion of Victoria, Australia in 1867. Yes, fun times. I'm guessing that Dan was reading probably this book yesterday, Dan Freeman, when he says he's reading about the development. Ugh. It's a good one. Warships out of London. So, let's see. Right, as we seem to have reached the end of the Trafalgar discussion, and as I have got a fluffy research assistant waiting downstairs who would like to go for a wander, I'm going to keep this going till about 45. So another few minutes, and I'll finish off answering questions. But I want to say thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you to everyone who's a subscriber, who's a patron, who's clicked on the little bell down there, all that. Thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed today. And I said there is another introduction video to come out later. If I've set it up right, it should be about midnight, but it might be earlier, it might be longer. And there's also a long patrol, which is going to come out, depending if I record it after this or record it tomorrow, that's going to be long patrol from Tuesday's video, which was on oh, good lord, brain's slowly dying. Suez will come out probably tomorrow at some point. Probably while I'm recording Bilge Pumps, actually. It'll come online and be visible to everyone, especially if I record it tonight. Alright. Well, Gox, thanks, Ron. Had fun with the usual subjects. Glad. Oh, that's good. Thank you. I'm not reading that out. I've already done an entire video. on Blackburns for you all. I'm not reading that out. I will probably have to return to the Blackburn at some point to do another one if you guys keep being so generous on it. But, you know. And that all goes to the Irn Bru Fund and the book fund. Thanks from King's Rook. Thank you, Colin Freeman, Colin's dad. Thank you, Bijan. Thank you, Denrick and Hammer. Consideramus, if you had to decide for one area of naval history that was the most necessary for contemporary naval strategy, what would it be? 1920s and 30s. But that's because it's my passion area, so that's probably me leaning towards it anyway. So, thanks everyone for answering Yank's question that I imagine would seem annoying. There is no such thing as annoying questions or stupid questions on this channel. It's the same as way as I run my classes. I don't like that. I have that idea. My thinking often is if someone's actually wants to ask a question, the odds are lots of people in the room want to answer that question. They're just too scared to. So, the only person who can be sarcastic and rude in my classes is me, and that will only come out if you decide to do things like answer your phone in the middle of my class. In which case, I have been known to pick up the phone out of your hands and have a chat with whoever's calling you in front of the whole class, just to make the point. Although that was a few years ago. I think they've changed the rules now, and I'm not supposed to do that anymore. But no one's done it in my class since, so. Jersey on 100. I recently listened to your video about tribals engaging Bismarck and possibly scoring a few torpedo hits. Was there any indication the next morning from other ships that Bismarck had been hit? None that could really see, but they weren't really getting that close to have a look. They were blasting away at her with a lot of shells. So, and then firing their own torpedoes. Constad, this is a bummer for me. I was laid off last week and starting a new job next week. Take care. Take care. Good luck. Hope you enjoyed the new job. Hope it's a good one. Thank you, Angus Sunnell. Kirk thank you. Eric Khan, thank you. Angus and Derpscott, thank you. Good night, Calum Gasberg. I will do the Adriatic at some point, don't worry. I am working on it. I'm just making sure I'm reading enough books so I can do it properly. Dan Freeman, take care. Danner Kanhwa, take care. Dan Rakanam, you should have a chat with my old chemistry professor, Doctor. While he didn't tell anyone you it was a stupid question, he looked at you like you were 5 if your questions weren't the best. Well, that just seems silly, because that's the way to stop people asking any questions. I remember my physics master at school, and he was definitely one of the tougher, more exacting teachers. But he always answered the questions. He didn't sort of go, did you do your reading sort of thing? Sometimes, but he would always encourage you to ask the questions because it was important. And all the good teachers I know, a good teacher encourages you to answer questions, and sometimes will even know the answers. Man, that King's Rook. Take care, Kilo 19. Thank you for being here. Jennifer, take care. I'll see you all on Sunday for Brew Ships. Take care, Danrakanha. Jack. Well, today I tried to end lesson on MS Teams by quoting Adolf from the Undertang bunker scene, parodied to death. High schools didn't get it. Oh, that's a sad time. They'll get it eventually. Perhaps you need to show them it. Take care, Adam Crow. Thank you for everyone for being here. As said, I'll wait till 1:45 just to check if there's any questions. Right. It's now helpfully lost the end of the questions and it's just catching up with itself. So that's what it does sometimes. That's the joy of YouTube. It's whizzing through the questions slowly, just in case there's any that come in. Oh, I don't know. Right then. Steph Thompson, take care. Night nights and kits. Thank you for the questions. Let's see. Steph Thompson, just a quick open question. Having fun with Jervis on World of Warships. She looks like a battle or daring, but not sure. Jervis is a J class, but yeah, they do have some similarities, and they are building up from the tribals. They used the tribal class bow. Constant Erasmus, what geographic region study do you think is most important for now? Ooh, study the South China Sea. Deb Scott, was Nelson secretly leading political machinations with his affairs like Charles II? Probably not, considering he was very rarely assured to lead political machinations. There are lots of good surfing spots in the southwest of England. I recommend Coverack Bay as excellent for surfing, although I mainly go oceans kayaking from there. I do like kayaking around the coast of Cornwall and seeing how far I can get out to sea. There's also some good spots for kayaking, ocean kayaking up in Scotland, and there's a fairly good number of lakes as well. Anyway. HMS Vampire Daring class will be coming to World of Warships soon. That is cool. That is cool. I think there's already a Daring class on there, though. I seem to remember seeing in one of the levels there's a Daring class destroyer available there, but not Vampire. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care. Have a good evening. And thank you all for the questions and for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.